I'm delighted to welcome today Emily Joliffe from Get Clarity, Let Go. And Emily, you're into beliefs, feelings, actions type of well-being stuff, and you're a counsellor and a well-being coach for parents of children with autism. So welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with you, Elaine.
So it's probably obvious from the way I've introduced you that you have a deep interest in helping parents with autism, because you are one.
That's
So
right.
tell us a bit about your story. I don't know where you'd like to start,
Certainly.
from the beginning to now, or from now going back. Entirely in your hands, Emily.
Beautiful. Thank you, Elaine. So, yes, I am a counsellor and a coach, also mum to three very amazing children. My eldest, who's 15 now, when he was 7, he was diagnosed as autistic. He didn't have any verbal delay, so that was what made it less obvious until 5, 6, 7. But he really struggled with complying in school, 2 different schools that he went to. And generally in social situations, if it wasn't on his terms, which most schools aren't, because the teacher's in charge rather than the children. So he really struggled in those sorts of situations. Things like the transition, most people don't even think is a transition, leaving the house to go in the car to go to the supermarket or a friend's house. That could take easily up to an hour, because he'd be lashing out and just finding it too hard for him. The schools struggled with him, he struggled with schools. And after he was 8 weeks in the first school that he went to, after a kind of very gentle kindergarten experience that was a bit easier for him. And then 4 terms he did in the second school that he went to, we then decided like they were getting to the end of what they felt they could provide for him. Although they were very helpful and saw him through getting a diagnosis, tried to put in one-to-one support, it still wasn't quite meeting his needs. So at that point, we didn't think that going to a third school would help at all, because he'd, for himself, perceived those experiences as a failure. And we didn't want to rack up a third for him. So we're like, okay, we're just going to keep you at home for a little bit and decide what to do. That was what he wanted. He didn't you can bear it being in those 2 schools. He was desperate to be taken out. So while we worked out which way was up and what we were going to do next, we found out about the Sunrise program, which is a way of working, parents and professionals working with their autistic child, which turned things around completely for us. So initially, just literally watching a few online videos that they have on YouTube, we discovered this amazing way of meeting autistic children, autistic people of any age, called joining. And that's where we started. My eldest has got long red hair down nearly to his waist to this day. And he always had it quite long, and he used to suck it. He used to suck his collars, he used to suck his cuffs. It took us about a year to work out. You probably know this yourself, Elaine. There was something going on in his gut. Enzyme wise, he needed to produce a lot of saliva, but I had no idea about that. And would just tell him in my kind of judgmental parenting ways of those days, trying to do the best I could with what little tools I had, that he needed to stop it, and it made his hair smelly and it was unhygienic. Obviously, it didn't work. So then looking at this Sunrise video about joining our children when they're doing isms or stims, things to take care of themselves. Some children flap, some children spin, pace up and down, talk repetitively. We just would join him. But my husband, who hasn't got long hair, started by joining him by sucking his own collar. And we hadn't thought that eye contact was a huge issue for our son. It was patchier with other people more than with us. But the quality of how he looked at my husband in that moment was just the most beautiful thing. Like, oh, you see me, rather than you're trying to change me, you don't accept me, you want me to be different. So just that moment turned everything around for us. And we followed up the training, went on a weekend training in London. From that, decided all about love and acceptance, which was, for the best will in the world, no school can provide for each individual child of 20 or 30 that they have in their class. We could do that one-to-one with our son at home. So we literally just started with 10, 15 minutes per day built that up over a few years to more like a school day of 6 hours per day with a team of volunteers that we trained around us to help him, expose him to different, every human is different. We all wanted to be like social ambassadors for humans are fun, social interaction is worth it for me, and a variety of different people around him. And now, as you say, I work with other parents whose children are neurodiverse, or autistic. One mum I'm working with this week has just noticed massive difference, just that 10 minutes per day, just being there for your child in a yes way. Like, I'm going to talk about what you want to talk about, or play what you want to play, join you if you're doing repetitive exclusive isms or stims. So yeah, it has this, obviously not a magic wand, but it has a huge benefit in terms of connection, ease, being able to be social, being able to be flexible, that our autistic children sometimes struggle with.
It's wonderful hearing that, Emily, but it also saddens me because my son is 28 now, and if I had known about this technique years ago, then I think our relationship would have been completely different. So it fills me with joy, but it also fills me with sadness.
My mum has said the same actually to me, Elaine.
Yeah.
I've got 4 brothers and 2 of them are autistic, and one has had a sort of troubled relationship over the years, much better now. But yeah, I totally get that. She's often said to me that that if she'd known about this, he wasn't actually diagnosed till he was in his 40s. What about your son?
My son was 12 when he was diagnosed, and with a similar situation, school to school, and the trauma, and I tried the home educating thing, but my situation is that I've pretty much mostly always been the breadwinner, so I was concentrating on that side of life, and not really giving much attention. Husband of the day is a musician, was a musician and continued. We're no longer together, but he was very supportive and at home with Andrew, and he was involved with his practice, while Andrew was just literally just sitting in his what do you call those bouncy chair things that they're comforting. They're not like bouncy, but just like gentle, can't think what you call them, baby cradle or something.
Oh yeah.
So, and he was just like looking around, and just looking but not engaging with anything. So of course now, and I've like you, I've helped families over the years. I became an advisor on the board of a specialist Asperger's college when we did get the diagnosis. So for many years I was an advisor more from a business perspective, so that I could then have involvement, and I helped to set up a branch of the National Autistic Society. So through our personal experiences, it's amazing how we can help other people, but at the same time, it's a juggling act, isn't it? Trying to be a mother, a wife, a parent, a friend, working, whatever, and it's very difficult. So I've never heard of the Sunrise programme. I'm definitely going to have to do some digging about on that. I've just recently launched the Perfect Health Hub, and there is I just wrote an article actually last week for it about autism. So this is now this conversation is now going to spawn another article for sure. Excellent. So you mentioned a couple of times the word STIM. You and I know what that means, but please explain it for the listeners.
Sure. So a STIM or an ism is any kind of repetitive, exclusive, self-soothing technique or action. Now, examples of that might be playing with your fingers. Like for example, I'm not autistic, but I like to play with my hair. My father used to say I was like an electrician in a hole trying to sort out the telecoms wires. I was very interested in my split ends as a teenager, and that's something I would find soothing. Some people love to watch Friends over and over again. So it could be just something that you find soothing. It could be looking towards a light. It could be looking towards like the window where the corners meet. All of our children have different ways of soothing themselves. What makes it different for an autistic person, as I understand it, and it's really worth hearing like actually autistic people's point of view on this, is that it's something more that they do of a need to soothe themselves, it tends to be exclusive, but they can also, like, sometimes, you know, if you're a verbal autistic person, more like you described about your son, my son, articulate, what used to be diagnosed as Asperger's, then you might need a listener if you want to talk with great fascination about your thing that you're motivated and passionate in. It could be steam trains, fishing, Peppa Pig, you know, depending on their age and stage, right? My son was very into bushcraft. He's now like quite keen on engineering. He's doing his GCSEs now. So like often for our older kids or more modern children, right? It could be gaming, for example, or talking about gaming. It's something that's repetitive over and over again, exclusive, that generally they don't need anybody else to do. But if it's a verbal one, they might need you to listen and be interested, even if it's the 1000th time you've heard it, right? And self-soothing. You can see that it makes a difference to their like level of calm. And the reason for joining that, the way I describe it, it's like walking over a bridge into their world. And from there, then if they're open and like showing what sometimes called green lights, like if they're engaged and looking at you, maybe there's some touch or moving towards you, but not looking as exclusive, then you can invite them with no push, but you can invite them back across that bridge to by being creative, by adding one thing, by asking them about something that they're motivated in. So yeah, that joining technique with their stims or isms is a really beautiful way in. And just a way of showing that we love them and accept them completely as they are. Like, they don't need to join us. We're just doing it because we adore them unconditionally.
Fabulous concept. You've mentioned that your son, who's now 15, is your eldest. How has the impact of his behaviour affected your other children and your relationship with your other children, and how you've nurtured them?
I think that's a great question, Elaine. I think everything I've learnt that's helped him has really helped me as a parent to support my other two. Now, there have been times that he just needed a lot more attention. And I'd be thinking, you know, is that okay that they're not getting as much of me? Or, you know, if it was a question of one of us as parents needed to be with him, the other parent was with the other two, were they getting enough? Because a lot of mums particularly heap on the guilt, right? And that, you know, not enough, not good enough, not doing enough, can't split myself, like you said, to juggle into enough different humans. It's not possible with only one body. Something I found massively helpful was another mum of an autistic child who had 3 boys in her case, one of them autistic. And one of the other children was choking, but she did the, you know, Heimlich maneuver on the other boy because he needed it. And she had this moment of realization that really helped me, that we help each of our children according to their need. So if one of them needs more one-to-one time, that's okay. And at the moment, my eldest son doesn't need as much. Like, he might need a bit of help with his GCSE coursework or reminding to do his revision, for example. But now at this point, my others are 10 and 13, we're more available. It kind of works over a whole lifespan rather than every day or every week, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. And does he go to a what we would call a normal school now?
Yeah, so from the age of, he would have been 12, halfway through year 8, the second year of secondary school, he started to want to learn from other people and think, because he basically taught himself to read as soon as he'd left school, his primary school, and he was out for 5 years. But at that point, having been like, oh, I don't want people, I don't want to learn from anybody else, quite happy and comfortable with my family. And we, like I say, reduced the transitions, didn't take him out to the supermarket because it didn't work for him, didn't take him to loads of parties, just kept things kind of quieter and lower stimulus. But at the age of 12, he was ready. So halfway through year 8 is here, we started checking out the special educational needs provision at different mainstream schools because he was able to. Now, some of the parents that I work with might have their child in a residential centre, they might have the child at a special school. It's just horses for courses, whatever works for that kid. mainstream worked for him, and he's now looking at choosing his sixth form college to go on and do A levels.
Wonderful. It's a truly lovely story hearing you explain all this, and the fact that you're willing to help other parents as well is amazing. Because you mentioned the word judgment earlier on. We're quick to judge, and I have been extremely quick to judge my whole life in all kinds of scenarios, and I'm learning, particularly in the last couple of years, how the judgment piece, that we all kind of just we either grow up with it or we don't, and I did. So being able to put ourselves in situations where we can empathise with other parents is great, but we still have our own beliefs and actions and feelings and everything as well. So it's a whole minefield, isn't it, of emotional stuff.
Definitely, and that's very much what I've been helped and now help other parents work with. I still work on it myself because it's never one and done. It's an ongoing journey throughout our lives. But yeah, absolutely, judgments are like the strongest, most powerful belief that we have.
Yes.
And like you say, we're often conditioned in that, like, this is good for me, this is bad for me, this is right, this is wrong, and often use that if we're small children and our parents aren't doing the best job by us. Then we've almost got to judge ourselves, rather than like, that parent's not safe for me. So then we're internalizing things, and then you bring in the judge for others. I'm learning a lot about it now in a positive intelligence coaching course I'm doing.
Oh, how interesting. I'm doing the same with Coach Shiraz.
Fantastic.
Yeah, oh, how amazing. Yeah. And I'm so thrilled to be doing this programme, because I'm an eternal optimist, and my daughter, who's 12 years older than my son, she's often said to me, Mum, you're so optimistic, you're so over the top, and not everybody's as optimistic as you are. And people hang on every word you say, and then that will make them feel inferior because they're not so optimistic, and their life doesn't have a silver lining and all the rest of it. So I thought, when I came across this training, I thought this is perfect, because I can then, because I do a lot of work with disc behavioural profiling, and through that EQ, emotional intelligence. So we've got IQ, we've got EQ, and now we're having PQ. So how fabulous that we're on the same course, unbeknownst. That's wonderful. So being able to learn ourselves every day is a school day, and learning about our judges and our saboteurs, and it's fascinating. I found that it was difficult for other parents, other people, the judgment from other people, commenting quite heavily and nastily in many cases, my own family included, on how my behaviour with my son wasn't right according to them, because at that time we didn't have a diagnosis, and I just thought we had a difficult child, because Charlotte is, she's 40 this year, unbelievably. Because I'm only 25, I don't know how that maths work, but there we go. So Charlotte's 12 years older, so she didn't have an awful lot of time at home with Andrew before she left home, to go in the big wide world. So and at that time we didn't have a diagnosis, but Andrew taught himself to read, goodness knows how. But by the age of 4, he was downloading instructions off the internet for games that he'd identified that he liked, and so he would read the instructions. So by the time a game arrived in the post, he'd crack it in half a day, where it would take months for some people. But that's even brilliant. Then, you see, we didn't know. We thought, what a clever chap we'd got, but we didn't know anything about behaviour and, these labels and so on. And you mentioned also the word Asperger's, which is now not given as a diagnosis. Do you know why they've dropped the Asperger label? They just call it autism now, don't they? And being on the spectrum.
Yes, it tends to be autistic spectrum condition, which I think is an improvement from disorder. Hans Asperger's, who it was named after, has been discredited in some ways. Like, a lot of his research was really useful, but I think he was in favour of eugenics. Quote me on that one. But
oh dear, we won't go down.
Very like, no, we don't want Asperger's. But some people, that was their diagnosis, and they're quite proud of it and like calling themselves Aspie. So I always go with what the person wants to call themselves.
Yes, yeah. It was such a relief when we got his diagnosis. So when we finally, I moved from one end of the country to the other to get him into a particular school. Wow. And that was one of the best things ever, because he had a year at private school down in South Wiltshire, which was a really good grounding, because he met a friend there who he's still in contact with today, and that's shaped some of the things that have happened.
That's wonderful.
But it's very difficult dealing with judgments. So when I see parents struggling with a child in the supermarket, you mentioned, because that's a major thing, isn't it? Before I left the UK, I'm now in Portugal, but before I left the UK, I noticed that they'd started some supermarkets, certain hours of the day, they'd tone the lights down. So we would go shopping. I would take Andrew, helping him to get used to the environment and so on. We'd go shopping at midnight, or 6 o'clock in the morning, or whatever, because often he'd be awake all night, which obviously would impact on me as well. But it's learning about what's available and what things they need to help them day to day. So I spent kind of 5 years learning how to support him, to the point where he is now independent and is a mature student at university and leaves this year. But sadly our relationship isn't good, and he's not spoken to me in about 18 months. But hopefully one day that will repair itself. But
I think it's always worth having that hope, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
That optimism. I think that's really wonderful.
What advice would you give to parents who have recognised that their child maybe is different, but don't know why, how, what, where, are at their wits' end with the situation?
So I recommend that people get it checked out as early as possible, because early intervention is really helpful for the child and also for the parents to know. Because like you say, if you're thinking yourself that you're not doing a good job as a parent, if other family members or school are telling you, and sometimes there is that parent blaming or seeking to divide, that somehow, we had that one parent was too soft. Guess who that was? One parent was too hard. Classic mother-father stuff. You're like, we're lucky to have two. So yeah, to get it checked out as soon as possible. And that's been really slow and slowed down diagnosis-wise, and statementing, EHCP provision, the piece of paper that you need in schools in the UK to get extra support, pay for the extra support in school for young people who have any extra additional educational needs. So yeah, absolutely get it checked out. And then I think the judgment part is to always think about it like almost a mixing deck with lots of different volume dials or sliders. That you're their parent, like they're their own best expert on themselves. They know what they need the best. That's why they're taking good care of themselves by stimming or isming, doing these self-soothing repetitive behaviours often. Even if they don't look like socially appropriate, you as the parent, you are their best resource. That was like the number one thing from Sunrise that really stood out. Like, actually, yes, we do know what we're doing. We love them the most. We're up with them in the night. We are going to go the distance with them. Like yourself, you're hoping that your relationship with Andrew repairs in the future. You're always going to be there for him.
Absolutely.
So yeah, to really listen, like turn your own volume up and turn other people's volume down, because they're not there in the middle of the night for you, for your child, for you.
This is and the depression side of things as well is enormous. And looking back now, knowing what I now know, the 5 years that Andrew was living with me was extremely difficult for him, which I wasn't aware of. I was trying the best that I could, but I had so many different things pulling me this way and that way. It was very difficult. So not beating yourself up as a parent, I think, is really important. And that goes to our self-confidence, our situation. And of course, we're all different, which is where I help people understanding the dysbehavioural style and how that impacts on our health, because our health and well-being, as parents, we need to keep our ship strong. Otherwise, we can't sail along with our children, can we?
That's why I tend to start with self-care with parents, because you can learn all the autism joining techniques or anything else, but if you're so exhausted and depleted and on your knees because you've been up all night, or for whatever reason that it's just difficult, then you can learn them but then not have the energy to put them into practice. So I do tend to start, especially when people are feeling really burnt out as parents and humans, like you say, trying to do all the things and juggle all the balls, spin all the plates, and just starting with like, how can we make your day easier? How can we help you get better rest so you've got better energy, get better nutrition, again to energize yourself, because it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. With our kids with extra needs, we learn so much along that journey, that I consider it a massive blessing, but we can't do it from an empty tank. There's no point in trying.
Absolutely.
With putting down the judgments of ourselves and really looking after ourselves in simple ways. You know, it might literally be sitting down with a cup of tea that's hot for 5 minutes rather than the mummy thing of drinking the dregs of the cold coffee and burnt toast.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. For years, even now, it's going now because of the training I'm doing with our positive intelligence course. My saboteurs, as Coach Shiraz would say, judgments on ourselves. So I was thinking, and I've been actually articulating what a bad parent I've been, but I've done the best I could with what I knew, what resources I had, etc., etc. And when Andrew was 12 and we got the diagnosis, we got a working diagnosis within 12 weeks. So it was very quick. And I know this day and age, the health authorities are very reluctant to put a diagnosis, because with that comes a financial cost. If you have a diagnosis, that means that you're going to be eligible for some financial support and extra tuition and so on and so forth. So it's very politically motivated and all this sort of stuff. My suggestion would be to take the children out of school, which is exactly what you did, and I had to with Andrew. In fact, I was asked to take him out of school, otherwise he would have been expelled. So it's very, very difficult, and we beat ourselves up, all the time. So judgment is there. Every day's a school day, every day has a silver lining, so there's lots of hope, and we can help other people.
Well, I love the positive intelligence course question that the coach asks, that what's his spin on it about, like, how is this perfect for me, basically, is my Option Institute counselling training language. But he says, if this brought me a lesson in the future, what would it be? How can I turn it around to an angle that I can see the blessing for, even if it's not right now in the present moment, but maybe in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how kind of I've ended up living my life, because so many things have happened to me over the years, and I don't regret any of them. I wish some of them may not have happened, but I know that they're gifts and blessings, because had they not happened, I wouldn't be who I am today and be able to empathise and understand with other people. So everything happens for a reason. I'm a great believer in that. And so being mother of a gifted child, it's a case of accepting that, understanding it, and learning how to work with it. But timing is really important as well, and the time for my son at the moment is to concentrate on university. Unfortunately, his first year was with lockdown and all that malarkey happened, so the point of him going away to help be in the big wide world on his own actually was difficult. But again, he would have learned and been stronger, and I understand that everything is working out for him now, and he and his sister are now getting on better, and she's really quite supportive. She's got a fabulous job. I'm really proud of both of them, and she's now supporting him.
Sometimes it takes for us to be out and do a little bit of a step backwards to allow that to come. So that's really gorgeous to hear.
Yeah, and her work in HR has brought her into contact with people who are neurodiverse, so I think she's now understanding a bit more about the situation. But at the end of the day, nobody can understand what it's like for a parent to be there, to know that you sometimes you're up all day all night for several days for various different reasons, and as you say, your cup gets empty. The depression side of things with the child, and the impact on that, not knowing if I went out, coming home, what I was to expect. Very often things would be smashed up and so on and so forth, and then judgment from the outside, oh, well, you're too soft, and this, that and the other. So it's amazing what happens, and how we can help other people through our experiences, I think, is so powerful. So when you say self-care, you've mentioned about sitting down, quietly having a cup of hot coffee or tea, whatever you're having. What else can a parent do in terms of self-care?
So I look at it in terms of starting with our physical health, our food, our drink, our movement, our rest. It's got to be the first thing of all, because again, like if you've slept really badly, then you're going to be slightly more likely to reach for the biscuits than the spinach, for example. So yeah, starting with rest, and then food, drink. Like, are you drinking enough water? Simple things. Are you going to the loo when you need to? Like, literally self-care 101, just really taking responsibility for our own well-being. But also as part of that, it's not like self-care, you have to do it all yourself. Absolutely, like reaching out to your community, because this parenting journey can need a lot of extra resources, like you say, whether it's tuition for the child, extra support in class for the child at school, but the family and the parents can need a lot of extra support. So not being too proud to ask for that is a really important part of looking after our well-being, and deciding to focus on that, to invest in time and money. But yeah, not self-care as like spa days and hamper experiences. It doesn't have to be an expensive thing. It's just putting ourselves first and reminding ourselves that we can't pour from an empty cup. So, just simple things like early nights, again, like asking people around where there are family, friends, neighbours, because people really do want to help. It makes us all feel good to feel that we've helped. Could you take my other child for an hour? Could you, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be that quid pro quo. I've looked after little Sheila for an hour, you have to take Jenny for an hour. Like, those things even out over time. And like I said about each child according to their need, it's each family according to their need as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, asking for help and taking responsibility for our own rest, our own needs, and then moving up the scale once we're rested and nourished and exercise, we've moved our body. Being out in nature, having connection with friends, whatever spiritual beliefs people have. But yeah, connection to friends, connection to yourself, connection to nature, connection if you believe in a higher power or simply like the universe. Connection in all of those ways. And sometimes that's through creativity, art, writing, reading, filling up our cultural cup as well. Kind of a ladder, a scale of those things, but it's got to start with maybe a nap.
Yeah, fabulous. How about work? Have you got any guidance for employers on how they could support people with a diagnosis, or people that are clearly, as you say, your brother didn't get diagnosed till he was 40. I've got a friend in her 70s who's only in recent years been diagnosed. And for her it made a huge difference, and it was welcome to then realise that her whole life she could put into context. So we don't necessarily get diagnosis, but the behaviour is a big thing that we know because we know, but a lot of people don't know. So how can an employer help in these situations?
Well, either an employer of an autistic person, neurodiverse person, with or without a diagnosis, or as you say, or of a parent of a child with extra needs. I think it's just being willing to go that extra mile and make the place of employment accommodating to everybody, whatever the need that presents, whether it's a bit of extra flexibility. We have gone a long way that way now with hybrid working and working from home, but just understanding, because that can really add an extra stress. Certainly I know as a parent, if you know that you can't work in the way that you might have wanted to or might have been able to before children, because maybe you have to go and pick your child up every other day from school. And then for employers of autistic people, again, just listening, starting by listening to what their needs are. Maybe it's a quieter space. And again, this is something that's grown hugely in the last 5-10 years, the presence of like actually autistic people online and on social media saying what those needs are, just like being open and follow the actually autistic hashtag and inform yourself a little bit about it. But just ask questions like, how do you want to be addressed? How do you want to me to refer to you as we mentioned, as autistic, with autism, on the spectrum? That's their choice to make. So being respectful of those things.
Yeah, very interesting. I could talk to you for hours on this, and I'm sure we will be liaising outside of this call today, Emily. Thank you so much for your time.
You're so welcome. Thank you for the invitation.
Tell us how the listeners how to get hold of you.
Certainly. So I have a group on Facebook, a free group for parents and family members of autistic children, neurodiverse children, called Special Parenting Together. You search Facebook for that, and I can share the link with Elaine. You're very welcome to join, because again, there's that solidarity of other people who just get it without you needing to over-explain yourself. My website is getclarity-letgo, like a hyphen, getclarity-letgo.co.uk. And again, I can share the link with you, Elaine.
Brilliant.
For parents or people who want to book a call, they're very welcome to do that on there, and it explains about the different kinds of supports in terms of particularly focused on self-care, building us up so that we've got the energy to be with our children with extra needs, and then particularly focused on autism coaching, the kind of things like joining those techniques, managing meltdowns, those difficult moments, and then just straight counselling as well.
Yes, meltdowns, that's a whole new, we could talk for days on meltdowns. Yeah, goodness me. Fantastic. Emily Joliffe from getclarity-letgo.co.uk. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elaine. Terrific.